I told my dad that I trust my mom's boyfriend more than him. My parents split when I was 10. Dad had an affair with Renee, who is now my stepmother. I didn't know the word affair at the time. I just knew that one afternoon I picked up the house phone to call my friend and heard my dad's voice talking quietly to someone, and the way he was talking didn't sound like anything I recognized. 2 weeks later, my mom sat me at the kitchen table with a cup of hot chocolate I didn't ask for and told me dad was going to be living somewhere else for a while. I watched my mom rebuild from nothing. She went back to work full-time for the first time in years. She sold her car and bought a cheaper one. I'd hear her on the phone with her sister after I was supposed to be asleep, voice flat and controlled, going through the logistics of a life being reorganized. She never cried in front of me, not once, and somehow that was worse. Dad moved in with Renee after 4 months. He wanted me to spend weekends there, to meet her dogs, to have my own drawer in the guest room. I refused for almost a year, and when I finally agreed to visit, I made sure he knew it wasn't for him. For years I was awful to Renee, not loud or dramatic. Worse than that, I was coldly, deliberately dismissive. She'd ask me a question and I'd answer her in the fewest possible words. She cooked dinner and I'd eat half of it and leave the table without a word. She came to one of my cross-country meets in the rain and I pretended not to see her. Dad called me out on it twice. I told him she could leave if it bothered her. Her daughter from a previous relationship, Cammie, was 7 when they moved in together. She had no idea why I hated her mom. She just watched it happen with these huge, confused eyes. Once she tried to show me a drawing she'd made of their 2 dogs and I walked past her like she wasn't there. I still think about that. It peaked at Dad's birthday dinner when I was 16. Renee had organized the whole thing, booked a restaurant, got a cake. I sat there silent for an hour, and then when Dad made some comment about us all being family, I looked directly at him and said, in front of everyone including Cammie, that the only reason we were sitting at that table together was because he couldn't keep his word to our actual family. Dad went rigid. Renee put her napkin on the table and took Cammie to the bathroom. My grandmother told me quietly that I needed to go wait outside. Dad found me in the parking lot. He wasn't angry. That was the unsettling part. He looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before. He said he understood why I was furious, but that punishing Renee for something she didn't do to me wasn't strength. It was just cruelty. He said he'd made a choice that hurt people he loved, and he had to live with that every day, and that if I wanted to hate him for it, he accepted that. But Cammie was 9 years old and had never done anything to anyone. I didn't respond, but something landed. I started therapy a few months later. My mom actually suggested it, which surprised me. She said she'd been going herself for 2 years, and that carrying anger around was expensive in ways that didn't show up until later. I went reluctantly, and then went consistently. It took about a year before I could look at my own behavior clearly. I apologized to Renee. It took me 3 attempts to say it in a way that wasn't full of qualifications. She accepted it without making a production of it, which was more than I deserved. Things became functional. Not warm, but functional. Then a few months ago, my mom mentioned she'd been seeing someone. His name was Patrick. She didn't make a big deal of it. Just mentioned it the way you'd mention a change in your schedule. He came to the house for dinner on a Sunday. A quiet guy who taught high school history and asked me genuine questions about my life without performing interest. He brought my mom flowers, not extravagantly, just a small bunch from the market. He helped clear the table without being asked. I noticed my mom laughed differently when he was there, lighter somehow. I mentioned it at Dad's place the following week, casually. Said mom had been seeing this guy Patrick. Seemed nice. They'd had dinner. Dad's expression shifted in a way he tried to cover quickly. How long? He asked. Few months, I said. Is it serious? Seemed like it could be. He nodded and looked at his coffee. 2 days later, he called and said we needed to talk. I went over and he started telling me that my loyalty should be with family. That it was strange I'd warmed up to this stranger so quickly when I'd spent years resisting Renee. That he hoped I wasn't being naive about this guy's intentions toward my mother. Something in me went very still. I asked him to say that again. He repeated it, softer, tried to frame it as concern. I told him that the difference between Patrick and Renee wasn't that one was a stranger and one was family. The difference was that Patrick hadn't walked into my life because my mom broke a promise to our family. That Renee's existence in my life had a specific origin and Patrick's didn't. That I wasn't choosing sides. I was just capable of telling those 2 situations apart. Dad got quiet, said that wasn't fair. I told him I thought it was actually the fairest thing I'd said in years. I left and drove around for a while before going home. That night my mom texted asking if I was okay, that Dad had called her. I said I was fine. She sent back a single word, good. Then Patrick texted. He'd gotten my number from my mom, apologized for the intrusion, said he just wanted me to know that he wasn't trying to be anything other than someone who cared about my mom, and that whatever I needed from him or didn't need, he'd follow my lead. I read it twice, showed it to no one, just sat with it. I haven't called my dad back yet. I'm not sure what I'd say. I spent years resenting someone for being in my home when she had no reason to be hated and every right to exist. And now my dad is asking me to look at a man who treats my mother with straightforward kindness and view him as a threat. I don't have the energy for that. I'm not sure I have the capacity to manufacture that kind of resentment anymore. Maybe that's what the therapy was actually for.